Hello, I'm Lisa Doolittle from the Faculty of Fine Arts, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to Ed Talks. Today I'm talking to Ken Voss from the Department of Physics at the University of Lethbridge. Welcome.
Thank you.
One of the reasons that I'm talking to you is that you're going to be a new teaching fellow.
Yes.
Working with the Teaching Center. So welcome.
Thank
It'll
you.
be great to work with you.
Yes.
I'd like to always find out when I'm first talking to teachers how it is that you became a teacher. Everybody's got a particular story, and I'm interested in hearing yours.
Well, when I first came here, I was focused mostly on my research, 100% on my research, and then I ended up with a 5-course teaching load right off the bat.
Oh boy.
And so that gets me right into the teaching right away. And then through experience and trial and error, I found I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. And it was interesting being on the other side of the fence, because as an undergraduate, you're always on the one side, and you're saying, well, if I do this and this, then you see that, it doesn't actually work as well that way.
You are easy to criticize your teachers when you're learning. It's a simple matter, but when you're on the other side teaching,
yes.
What were some of the very early things that you discovered about teaching? Can you remember?
Motivation of the students, getting them thrilled and involved. Because I remember when I was doing my first year of undergrad, it felt like all we were doing is stuff that was 400 years old. And everybody goes, oh, that's boring. What's about the new stuff? So try and connect it to modern events and activities, and intriguing them and say, yes, this is not something that's old. It's something that's new.
For those of us who aren't in physics, an example of something that's old, and perhaps an example of something that's new, or how you would maybe turn that into something more motivating for contemporary students.
Well, your smartphones have a lot of technology involved there. There's the camera, there's the microphone, there's the touch screens, and a lot of the concepts and ideas started hundreds of years ago.
I need to know a specific example. Tell me about the touch screen. Where's that from, or is that too specific?
No, some of the touch screens actually work as charged capacitor plates. So if you have a different charge on the two different plates, then you can bring your finger close enough, and it creates a strong enough electric field that the current actually jumps across the plates, and it sort of closes the switch. And
so what part of physics would that be for students?
Oh, that would start in Physics 2000.
Okay.
Yes, so it starts right at the basics, and those basics are the fundamentals for technology today.
And the basics come from years ago.
Yes, they do.
Okay.
Newton started optics and mechanics, and a lot of that optics, he developed a telescope. And so those ideas still go on today in your cameras, and your eye is a nice example of a camera.
Exactly.
So the whole ideas have been going on, and the idea is just to try and get them to realize, no, this isn't old stuff, this is new. And you can still use these concepts in today's society.
Exactly.
Yes.
I mean, it's one thing to motivate students by comparing it to contemporary objects that are around them and so on. But, teaching is not just about the content, right?
No, it isn't.
Surprisingly, you can't just shovel something from your brain into the student's brain, now can you? So, can you tell me about some of the things that you've discovered in teaching that really work for you? Methods, ideas.
I try to use a lot of different methods and approaches at the same time. So there's some active learning, there's some passive learning involved. So I'll use videos off the internet combined with diagrams and drawings on the boards. My drawings usually give the students a good laugh. So
maybe you need to come to the Faculty of Fine Arts and brush up on your skills a bit.
Yes. So I'll use the internet, the boards. I'll get them involved. I'll have them trying things and try it themselves. There's too much computer, I think, in their background right now, and a lot of the science is experimental. You really have to touch and feel.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because we think of physics in particular as being so theoretical, that it's so advanced theoretically. But you're saying that the students learn have to learn by experimentation.
Yeah.
How does that work in your classes? That getting your hands on things.
Well, we have the labs, but we also have a lot of demonstrations that we can bring in at the junior level. And for example, you can tell them what a torque is, but they really don't appreciate it until they've actually felt it. And so there's some nice demonstrations on, okay, this is what a torque is, and that's how you can increase your torques to change the bolts on your tires or turn a wrench.
You said they have to feel it. What do you do to make, I mean, I'm imagining Ferris wheels or, fair rides.
Yes, that's one way.
But in the
Well, I don't have
classroom, you
to-
can't do that.
No, there's smaller items. You can use a bike.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. If you're pedaling and wheels spinning, you've got angular momentum and you've got applied torques to cause it to spin. And so you can use smaller items to illustrate that, or a force. You can try and push a student out of a chair if you want.
Okay.
Well, you're in drama.
That's right.
So
Yeah, you enact things, that's right.
yeah. So yeah, you can get the students to push on each other and try and figure out, okay, how's a force or what's a torque, and you can relate it to things in their bodies. Like you can talk about center mass of the body, and you can talk about muscles in the body, how it acts like levers, and so. One of the courses I teach is Introduction to Biophysics, and so getting applications that relate to biology, biomechanics, so kinesiology, neuroscience people is very important for them. And so at that level, the first introductory level, yeah, it's a lot of examples saying, okay, this is not old stuff, this is actually relevant to what you want to do in your life. And so I try and intrigue them and get them to think, oh, okay, this is kind of neat. Because I really don't think of myself as a teacher as much as a guide.
Okay.
Because when they hit that 17, 18-year age, they think they know everything, right? A lot of them. And they have opinions about everything. So I try and more guide them and say, okay, look at this. What's this doing? How does this apply?
Ask questions.
Ask questions.
So at that beginning phase, you must have all kinds of students in your classes. This is a liberal education university. Again, that's what kinds of students do you run into?
The majority of my students would be from biological sciences, neuroscience, kinesiology. I usually teach the Physics 1050, Introduction to Biophysics. So that's where I'll see them. And in Physics 1000, we see chemistry, biochemistry, and the physics majors.
Not too many of my drama students.
No, I don't see too many drama students in there.
Yeah, physics is hard.
No, it's not hard. It's just trying to think and understand about what's happening around you. And sometimes it takes you by surprise. That's one of the things I like to do at the beginning, is show them something that surprises them that they were not expecting. Because they come in, well, okay, I've got 18 years of experience, I know what's going to happen. And then they just sit there and they go, whoa.
Well, what things are surprising to them?
Yeah.
What kinds of things are surprising?
Well, my glasses produce images, glasses, mirrors. So you can have virtual images, which is what most people are familiar with, or you can produce real images. So it looks like a real object, but it's not there. Or you can produce holograms. And so there's a lot of things that come out just from basic physics that they just go, oh, that's kind of neat.
Right.
And I was not expecting that.
Right.
Yeah.
So beyond the beginning stages, what else do you teach as you move into the more advanced students, the more specialized areas? What's your area of teaching?
Well, I've taught all over.
You do?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
So I teach introductory physics. I've taught introduction to biophysics. I've taught physics and society, which is a course on the history of physics. So I'll start with the Greek philosophers and work my way up. And at the senior level, I've taught electromagnetism, condensed matter, solid state, so that's the physics of solids. And I've taught quantum mechanics. And
I'm nodding just because I've heard the
So
names.
thanks.
It's not
Yeah,
that I know
okay.
anything about it.
yes, so I've taught a lot of different material at the more advanced levels. Yeah. And so,
That's challenging, don't you think? Moving between subject matters?
well, my background's in condensed matter, and actually you sort of need all the areas of undergraduate physics when you're studying that. So
Explain condensed matter, please.
Okay, so condensed matter can be solids like wood, it can be metals, so metals can conduct electricity, it can be insulators, you can have thermal insulators like your clothes that keep you warm in the winter. And they have different properties. You have magnets, they can have different structural shapes depending on the pressure or temperature. So they can go through structural changes, they can go through property changes.
Okay, okay.
So you get them too hot and they can lose their magnetism. And so they have electrical properties, they have optical properties, magnetic properties, and I try and understand the properties of these materials.
Okay.
Yes, and so I need quantum mechanics, I need electromagnetism, and I need materials, science.
So in a way, all of this teaching is part of your own foundation. So
Yes, it
the
is.
subject matter is very familiar to you.
Yeah.
Okay. Were there? I want to just return to the formation of you as a teacher. Were there? We have at the Teaching Center quite a big push towards peer mentoring. You know, teachers helping each other out. Did you have any of that in your background, where another teacher or professor, or did you have a mentor? Did you have a moment where, you know, a particular person or a mentor, somebody helped you figure out some teaching stuff?
No, it was trial by fire.
Trial by fire, okay.
Yes. Actually, my very first course was mathematical physics at Queen's University. So I did a course there, did their mathematical physics course, and then I came here.
And what was the fire? It
What
was
the
trial by fire. What was?
Physics and society. I had to teach physics, the history of physics, to non-physics students, non-science students. Actually, it was.
Right.
It's listed as a humanities course.
Okay.
And so I was so used to thinking in terms of mathematical terms in my research and in that other course. And then it was, okay, I can't use any math here. I can't use anything that I'm familiar with. And it was basically, I had to switch my entire approach to the way I taught.
What did you do? How did you manage that?
Well, there's a few bumps along the way. So I introduced debates, quizzes, got them actively involved. There was papers, presentations. So I tried a lot of things that I wasn't familiar with or used to. So it was, like I said, trial by fire.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you taken anything from that experience into other classes?
I actually take a lot of that into my other classes, except the debates. The debates I left behind there. Because physics typically doesn't get people riled up, except in that course. Yeah, it was, because a lot of the physics we talk about at that point, most people are in agreement, so it's not like cutting edge where you got big splits between the experts saying, no, it's this way or it's this way. So with those courses, yeah, I removed the debates, but I kept term papers, presentations, again, working on their writing skills, oral skills.
And why would that be important to science students?
Oh, it's very important. You have to be able to communicate your ideas and concepts with your community and your peers. And so I never did have enough experience in that respect in my undergraduate.
The communication aspect.
Aspects, yeah.
So it sounds like that's quite I was going to ask, that's quite a contemporary approach. Like, what is important to physics teaching now, do you think? If you say that you're bringing the present into your students' learning, even though you're connecting to the past, but what is really compelling about teaching physics these days? Why is it important?
Oh, why? Everything, everything is physics.
Of course.
Yes. I was involved with that instructional skills workshop last year.
Oh, you were?
Yeah.
Well, you've drunk the Kool-Aid then.
Okay.
Welcome to the crowd.
Yes. And I picked specifically the group that had no people from the sciences in.
Aha.
Because I was interested in seeing some of the teaching styles from non-science, the humanities, social sciences. Mm-hmm. And that was my primary objective for going in, was to see, okay, what are these other things going on in there? And I've forgotten your question again because it went off topic.
No, that's
but,
fine. Let's go into the instructional skills. I was asking about why is learning and teaching about physics important now. Yeah. But I think let's just take a side trip into that instructional skills.
Told them, physics is everything.
Yes. Yeah.
Because physics comes from the ancient Greek word of nature or natural, and so it is the study of the natural universe and everything within it.
Right.
So everything is physics.
Right. But it is a certain perspective, like you say. You look at the natural world from a particular perspective. Yes. In the instructional skills, for those of you who don't know what that is, it's a boot camp that we do, a boot camp. 4 days of intensive intellectual work, let's call it. Yeah. Even experienced teachers are required to teach short mini lessons in front of their peers and receive massive amounts of critique about their teaching effectiveness.
Yes.
And then you also participate in watching the other people in that intensive course. So what were some of the absolute highlights for you of that experience? It's teaching development.
Yes, it introduced me to other ways to introduce active learning.
Active learning.
Yes, into the classroom and how you can get students involved at all scales. Like one of the things I think is very important is know your students' names. And that was hard when I had a class of 100. But,
absolutely.
But I did get it by the end of the year.
Wow, good for you.
When I have 60 students and the intro courses are 80.
Wow.
It's a lot of work, but I think the students appreciate it. They're a little shocked at the beginning when you go, you know my name?
That's impressive.
So it's at the senior level, that's not too hard.
Much smaller classes.
And because one thing I like about the way I teach is I have lots of office hours, and I encourage my students to come and see me, because I think that's an important part of addressing the individual problems that the students have. So some of them will have problems with a certain aspect of the material, and then we'll just talk about it, and they can work on the whiteboard, and we'll just chat about
that
where
one-on-one.
It's more like 1 on 6 or 8.
Right.
One student put a little sign outside my door. It says Ken's Camping Ground.
Ken's Camping Ground. That's very sweet. Yeah, that evokes a very nice little community there.
Yeah.
Sitting around the campfire, talking about physics.
Exactly. Yes.
Well, you must have such a good rapport then, if students feel that your office is a campsite.
They're just struggling to get through.
Yeah.
Because one thing I do expect at the senior level is I expect them to attain a level that is competitive with the other universities in Canada. So the fourth year students and the third year students really feel the push, and they think I push it a little too hard at times. I think it's important also for them, because they are going to be having to compete against the other students, that they have at least that content and an understanding.
And that's very important, because once you have a degree in physics, I suppose a fair number of them are planning to go on to further study in physics.
I think, yes, a fair number plan on it. And then some of them would like, I think maybe they think about different avenues on where to go, because there's a lot of things out there related to physics in engineering. So I know some went masters in engineering programs. There was one student we had that actually wanted to do science films. And there's a graduate school in the States, and you need to do a BSc in sciences first before you can do the film.
Oh, what a fascinating thing. Who
Yes.
knew?
Who knew it?
Yeah.
One of my former students wanted to be a lawyer after, so he took his physics degree to law.
How interesting. How would a foundation in physics feed into law?
Yeah.
What skills are they learning that feed into that kind of
It could be
way
with
of legal thinking?
maybe corporate law, and or engineering law, where you worry about cases of something not working the way it's supposed to.
Oh, I suppose it would give them that kind of background.
Yeah.
Yeah, so these are the kinds of contemporary things. So I'm going to circle back to the question about why is it important for your teaching to be effective for students of physics now?
That's interesting. I find with the newest generation that they've become so dependent on the internet and the computers and their phones, and a lot of their their gaming is online.
Yeah.
And they have, in my opinion, lost touch with the actual real world, because things on the computer do not work the same as they do in real life. And so they're not out there throwing the baseball or playing basketball as much. And I think a lot of that hands-on experience through their childhood is missing in a lot of them. And so I think that's actually made physics more important.
Because it's so grounded in your body and in the real world.
Yes.
That's really fascinating.
Yeah.
Because one would think that you've also mentioned how physics connects to the technology, and yet here you are saying that you feel that because of technology, people are removed from the very fundamental understandings of it.
Yeah. Well, they've been able to have a dinosaur eat people for the last 25 years, so.
That's right, in their
games.
games.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
And on the movies.
Yeah, all the CGIs,
Yes.
yeah.
And a lot of the physics is sacrificed for the art, and I find in the movies and in the games. And there's a few movies that try and keep the physics right. Interstellar tried that. It was pretty
The
good
Martian?
job. Actually,
more
haven't
biology.
I haven't seen The Martian, so.
Well, I guess you have to be a fan of that star. And I don't know, it's more about biology perhaps than physics. But yeah, interesting. So that's an amazing perspective. Yeah.
So I tell them Interstellar is a good one to watch.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the physics inside the wormhole, but the outside stuff, they got pretty good.
Meaning I'm trying to think Interstellar, which one that is. There are many of these.
Oh, that's the one where the planet's dying, and then there's this wormhole over by Saturn.
Okay.
And they have to go through it to this other place in the universe, and they look at these 3 planets that could possibly support humans.
Right. Okay. Have you ever used films in the classroom?
A little bit. If I want to show something that I just can't bring in as a demonstration, yes. Yeah, it's usually something shorter though.
Yeah, no, you can't show hour-and-a-half films.
Films, no.
Or as it were, 3-hour films these days.
Yeah, short clips off of YouTube work. Because you can show some nice effects off of there that you just can't do in a classroom.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So, like, I talk about the Magnus effect for a little bit.
Magnus effect?
In Physics 1050. Well, that's where you put a spin on a ball.
Okay.
And you can get the ball to curve.
Okay.
Like you see in soccer or
in baseball, yeah.
Baseball, yeah. So, it's an interesting effect, but you can't really show that too well in the classroom as well.
Without breaking lights and windows and...
Plus, some of the demos on the YouTube are pretty effective.
That's true.
Yeah.
So some of these new technologies are actually very, very helpful in teaching. Do you use a lot of the technologies on campus in your teaching?
A lot, as in what respect? There's a lot of different things.
You use YouTube, you use the projections. Are there other kinds of technologies that, like, in order to encourage this kind of active learning that you've talked about, have you been using some of the technologies that are available for that?
So we have a lot of our demonstrations already set up in the labs, and so I can just bring those to the classroom as opposed to. Yes, there's a lot of technologies I have used and tried, but I want them more focused on the material as opposed to trying to wow them with something new all the time. So it's a little bit of give and take. Yeah. So I like a little bit of old-fashioned and a little bit of modern stuff. Yeah. Just keep them guessing what's going to happen.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Because like I said, you need some of that hands-on, and so
Yeah.
they really need to touch.
What's the relationship between, I think it's quite unique in the sciences, between the lab situation and the classroom situation? How does that work? Because surely all of your courses are tied to lab work.
Yes.
Can you explain how that works in your department and in your own teaching?
It works pretty good. For example, I'll be talking about concepts in the lectures, doing some demos, and in the labs they'll be doing something that correlates with that, where they actually do an experiment and they see the results of that experiment, and they say, okay, yes, this is how objects actually behave. Because it's one thing to show them demonstrations or try it in there, but to actually do the measurements and measure and say, oh, okay, yeah, that is correct. It brings it home a little bit more.
Do you find, I'm recalling from, vague Science 10, a long time ago, there was a lot, students have to also understand the scientific method, right?
Yes.
Do you have to teach that? Do you find yourself teaching the scientific method as well as the content and the experience of the experiment?
That comes through more in the experiments in the lab.
Okay.
So you have your hypothesis, you build your experiment, you do your test, then your analysis, and then you make your conclusion or revamp your hypothesis. And so that the whole scientific method is basically incorporated within there. Yeah. I'm not sure if we actually spell it out word line by line, but that's basically what they're doing.
It strikes me as such a different, well, perhaps I'm wrong, but it's such a different approach, such a particular perspective, and there's some controversies about that in the contemporary world, aren't there? That the scientific method is very step by step, and yet problems in the world are so complex that they need other kinds of thinking. How do you react to that?
I'm a supporter of the objective.
Of the objective, you are.
And the scientific method. Yes. When I was in grade school, I hated subjective courses and I hated subjective grading. I wanted it to be black and white.
Okay, well, that's a very good choice of career for you.
Yes.
How was that when you were in the instructional skills workshop with all those, humanities, social sciences, arts teachers? How did that hit the ground among that crowd? How did that
I just
perspective
told
work?
them physics is everything. So
Exactly. What was one of your more memorable, you have to do, I think it's 3 or 4 mini lessons. Can you remember one of your own that you did, or one of the other teachers that you did? Because one of the points in that workshop is not necessarily to teach your own content, because then you fall into habits, and the idea of that boot camp is to grow and change and develop new strategies. So people teach all kinds of crazy things: how to paddle a canoe, how to tell the difference between one kind of water and another kind of water, all sorts of crazy things. So what was your experience of that?
the one that was probably the farthest away from physics would have been teaching them how to play crib.
How to play crib.
Yes. So, and I lucked out because there was 2 in there that were expert crib players and 2 that were novice and never played before.
And why was that lucky? Because you didn't get to
because-
practice your teaching if there's already experts there.
Yes, the novice needed an instruction, and we had to go through the steps on the rules. And it was probably a little more complicated of a game than I should have picked.
For 10 minutes.
10 minutes. 10 minutes was tough to teach crib in. But it was kind of nice because after my talk, we had lunch, and so we all sat down and played crib afterwards.
Well, obviously it was successful and people enjoyed it.
Yes.
And that sort of points out one of the things in teaching theory that students do teach each other, and peer-to-peer teaching is actually a really valuable thing. Do you see that in your classes?
Yes, and even in that crib game, it worked out nice because I paired up one expert with one a novice, and so I had a team with that could work together with both an expert and peer, and so they got that peer instruction.
And what's the value of that? Because surely you're the expert, and you shouldn't be turning over your teaching to students. What's the value of I'm playing the devil's advocate, obviously.
Yes.
But what's the value of peer-to-peer teaching?
It's got its pros and it's got its cons.
Okay.
So the pro is that at that level, they understand the problems that the other students have a little better. Because sometimes they'll ask me, and I'm trying to wrap my head around, okay, why are you having a problem with this? Because it's been so long since I've been in that boat.
Right.
So that's where the peer instruction helps nicely, because they're more at that same level, and then they can say, okay, this is how you get around this. And with me there, then I make sure that that person isn't telling the other person mistakes or something that's wrong.
Exactly.
Yeah. Which can always happen. For example, I remember one time there was these 3 students sitting outside my class with their assignments ready to hand them in, and they were talking about the assignments, and one student convinced the other 2 students that her answer was correct, so the other 2 went and busy erased their answers and copied hers down, and she was the one that was actually wrong.
Right, so that's the downside.
So that's the downside.
Yeah.
And so that's where I would be there on a peer instruction to make sure that that type of mistakes don't happen. Right?
Well, I think that's actually quite wonderful. Some instructors, I think, may feel that, especially as you're saying, you want your students to compete nationally, would just go for the superstars, right? And would put the superstars with the superstars so they could really progress and, sink or swim to the rest of the people. What's your feeling about that kind of attitude? I mean, I do hear people talk about that and feel that really this, to get really good quality, the good quality people have to stay together.
I think some people mature slower than others, and just sort of throwing them off to the side is not good teaching. They can rise up to the occasion just at a later stage. I've seen that many times. Students struggle in their classes, but once they start getting into the research lab, they just excelled and did really well. Yeah, just a different environment and different strengths.
Different kinds of learning. Some people better at the hands-on, and some people better in the brain stuff.
Yes. You see a lot of that in physics. Some people are much better at the theory, and some people much better with building experimental equipment and doing the hands-on experiments.
Right.
So we do see that dichotomy there.
Right. Now, you were going back to sort of the beginners or this slow maturing. It sounds to me like the sciences and physics, even in particular, is doing a lot of outreach, meaning that you go beyond the university's boundaries. Can you tell me more about that?
Well, we have several outreach programs on campus here at the University of Lethbridge, and some of them, like Let's Talk Science, will go out to the high schools or the middle schools and do little activities with the students. And so the teacher invites us in, we'll come in, we'll do a little experiment and get the student involved with this. For some teachers it works nice because if they don't have the experimental equipment there, then we can just bring it in and they get the hands-on experience.
What's something that you do with middle schools? Because that's way at the beginning of scientific thinking. What's an example of something you might do?
Curriculum's lately changed in Alberta, and so a lot of electricity is now done at grade 8 or grade 9 level.
Okay.
I can't remember. So I've done electricity, parallel circuits, series circuits.
So many of the physics demonstrations on campus that are almost like performances in themselves. Is that the kind of thing you do in schools? You blow things up and things overflow and very exciting things happen?
At that age and the outreach, yes, you want to get the wow factor in there again.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was saying, it seems really dry. A lot of people are turned off by that, and they think, okay, this is 400-year-old science. I'm not learning anything new, and this is boring. And so I think a lot of performance is part of it. Yes.
Right.
Yes, you have to be almost a performer in some
Yeah.
respects.
You take on the role of the mad scientist.
Yes. There's lots of things you can do. More dangerous ones you would do as a demonstration, keep the students away, and then let them do some hands-on stuff and show them how it relates to their everyday life. Try and get them enthused. Just sort of try and guide them to the water, and hopefully they drink.
Right. And that enthusiasm is really a key to learning, don't you think?
It is.
That spark that's from the student themselves.
Yeah.
And very, very hard as a teacher to inspire.
Yes. Because once they've lost interest, then they're not learning. And
Right.
they're not going to learn anything. And
Yeah.
so, which is hard at the university level here because they've already have their opinions about subject matter. And so middle schools are nice and elementaries are nice because they still got that curiosity of everything around them. But university, yeah, they're starting to get their opinions. I don't like physics, it's too hard or something like that. And so you got to try and refire that, kindle that interest and that curiosity for the material.
What do you think science teaching, or perhaps your own teaching in particular, might have to offer to the university community as a whole? You know, we're a liberal education university. You're going to be a teaching fellow. What sort of thing, what unique kinds of things can your experience of teaching physics over this period of time offer to the rest of us who are working here?
I think in physics we have probably a harder battle convincing people that physics is interesting because, as you said, physics is hard, and a lot of people coming out of school think that.
Right.
And in Alberta, you only have to take 2 to 3 sciences, and so the one that's usually dropped is physics.
I dropped it. But I blame my teacher. I don't blame the subject. I blame my teacher. Anyways, yeah, I think that's interesting. And so in your teaching, you know, you've talked a little bit about that. So that's what you feel you can, partly what you can offer across the community is this business of
How to get the spark.
how to get the spark, how to get students interested.
Yes. One of the harder things is the ones that have said no, and then they don't show up to classes except for exams or quizzes. And
Right. Can physics be learned just from a book? I mean, some people think that about sciences. You just read it, the answers are clear, yes or no. All I have to do is study this, memorize it. Bob's your uncle.
no,
No.
no.
Why not?
Why not? There's certain aspects of physics that you can't convey in a book. Science is experimental, right? You got to be able to experimentally prove or validate it, and hence the scientific method. And sitting there reading a book is not going to teach you physics or chemistry or biology. You really need to do it. And doing it with a group helps. It's sort of like that peer instruction again when you're doing it in a group.
That's interesting because I think you're right, obviously. And I think that in the world, that's where the scientific method is so valuable. You're working on the edge of things. You're saying we know this much and how can we create the new knowledge? And you can't do that unless you're actually experimenting, right?
Yeah, and you see that in some of the online courses people do, because you can do a lot of their university courses online. And they come out not at the same level.
Is that right?
Yeah.
You really need that
Yeah.
in person.
You do. You need the experiments, you need that in person.
Well, I'm very heartened to hear that because that certainly lines up with my beliefs and that personal interaction, that seeing what's happening in the moment with the learning is really important, isn't it?
Yeah. And everybody sees things slightly different because you can talk to a class of 100 students and some of them will understand certain pieces, some other students will understand something slightly different from it. And to get the full picture, that takes time, experience, and some work.
Your research, I assume, is at the edge of something. And you're pushing at the edge of something in
Yes.
physics. And often, the teaching, when we're at the edge of our field and we're pushing at something, involves students at a higher level, at master's students and PhD students. What's your experience in that world, of that different world of teaching and learning at that higher level?
It's an interesting. You have to use a different approach, and you really have to push them to the next level to make them think, okay, what's going on here? And because you don't want them doing just a simple, okay, my assignment's done or my term paper's done, and they hand it in and boom, it's gone. And, it's at the graduate level, they have to say, okay, this is what this means, and this is how this connects with this, and they have to see a bigger picture and understand it at a much deeper level. And making that transition from the undergraduate to the graduate level takes some work.
It takes some work. And
Yes.
how do you manage that? Do you think? I'm asking a hard question because I'm thinking of my own work, and I think, well, I watch my grad students work, I read their writing, I observe their projects, I make suggestions.
Well, there's almost a continuous oral exam going on because you meet them and you ask questions and then you probe and you say, oh, that doesn't sound quite right. And so you probe a little bit more and say,
Did you think about this?
yes. Have you read this paper?
And you start revitalizing your own work, don't you? Because you think, I know what piece would connect to what you're thinking about.
Yes. And so you got to make those connections, and you got to delve into it a little deeper than just what's in the book, basically.
Yeah, and it's pretty exciting work, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
It is.
Yeah. What is your research, may I ask? What is the area that most excites you in your own work?
I like all of physics, so that's the problem.
Do you like it all?
Yes.
Great.
I did a lot of research in condensed matter, as I brought it up.
Yep.
And so I still delve into that. But I'm also, over the last few years, been working in pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. So this is the study of a
Sounds
drug.
like pharmaceuticals, yes?
It is?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a study of drugs within the human body.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, and actually with applications to chemotherapy.
Oh, very interesting. That's very of the moment.
Yeah, so study drugs, how the body interacts with it, how it gets rid of it, eliminates it. And,
Gosh, that sounds more like biology and chemistry.
I said it's all physics.
Okay, if you say so. Yeah, so that actually must be very motivating to people if they come into your lab to see you working on a very real world problem, like the problems of cancer and of drug use.
Well, it's I'm doing theoretical work down here, so it's not something that they can look at in a microscope or touch.
Okay.
So, so it's less enthusiasm than you think.
Okay. And you're working across with other colleagues at that point too.
Yes.
Non-physics people?
Mostly physics, but it's a very multidisciplinary field. So there's biophysicists involved, there's biochemists, there's biologists, there's medical doctors.
Right.
And so it's a very widespread disciplines. And each person brings in a different thing to the table.
And so this is where your notion about students needing good communication skills comes in, doesn't it?
Oh, yeah.
If they're going to move on, then they're going to have to talk to people who don't come from their own backgrounds.
Right. Yeah. And so people that go into biophysics or go into medical physics or health physics really need to be able to communicate with people from different fields, especially medical physicists and health physicists who usually end up working in clinics or in hospitals.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Who knew? It sounds like a kind of a life and death thing, in fact.
We don't deal with the patients as much.
Right.
They're close by, and that's more the medical doctor's purview. And yeah, but anything we can do to help or improve things. For example, a lot of medical physicists can go into imaging, so MRIs and
Right.
PET scans, CAT scans.
Right, which are so frequent
Yeah.
and so much in demand now.
Yes, they
yeah,
are.
that must have been quite a revolution in care.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, it was.
And we're getting an MRI on campus, as I understand. Are you going to be involved with that?
No, it was installed on May the 24th.
Oh, so it's already there. My goodness.
It's already there, yes.
Excellent.
No, I will, that's for the neuroscience department
Right,
mostly. And I
right.
think they're also going to use it to image humans, I think.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't heard too much about it. So, no, I won't be working with them.
No, you're not
no,
with them.
No.
No.
No,
Okay,
so-
well, like you said, you don't need the big fancy equipment necessarily.
No.
You're working with the natural world.
Yes. Yes. And a lot of my work is theoretical. So it's,
Okay.
For example, we're trying to improve the efficiency of drugs or drug combinations in chemotherapy. Sort of increase the survival rates and try and help doctors say, okay, this is the drug regime that you should have here. Some of the work I'm interested in is how does drug regimes vary based on gender, ethnicity.
How fascinating. So you have to get into very social kinds of areas, societal areas, and out of the scientific areas. in
I
your
think a
work.
lot of it's body, because male and human bodies are different. You get different numbers of enzymes, for example, depending on your ethnic background. And for example, people in Africa, about 90% of adults are lactose intolerant, whereas Scandinavian countries, about 90% can drink milk throughout their entire adult.
Right.
So it changes
Things,
from group
yeah,
to
things
group.
are different. Yeah, yeah. That's
And so
fascinating.
that actually interests me a lot. It's just, okay, how does this thing change from one group to other groups? And
Right.
how-
That detail
yeah,
of understanding those differences.
right. It gets my students interested. In fact, some of the students that I've had work for me over the years come out of biology or the other sciences, and they're taking Physics 1050, and they find out what I'm doing, and they go, well, that's kind of interesting. And it opens up this whole new level.
Right.
Right. And physics is working everywhere. For example, David Naylor, some of his research, he does astronomy and develops instrumentation for satellites. And some of that is actually being applied to detecting cancer.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So he does cancer research also on this a little bit.
And it's so fascinating to me how this enters the classroom at the university level. And I think sometimes that's hard for people who are not up here at the university to realize that connection between the research and teaching, which is unique to the university environment.
Right.
And it sometimes comes in sideways, it sometimes comes in directly. But as you say, a student finds out what your particular research is, and it might inspire a whole new career for that
So
student.
it does.
And if you were not involved in in-depth research, that career might never open.
Exactly. That's one of the nice things about the liberal education and the university, and you have to take courses in physics and chemistry and biology and all the other subjects.
And fine arts, like your film student, your science film student.
I was going to say drama. Actually, I did recommend drama to a couple of science students because that would be nice for them, because that would work on helping them with communication skills, working in front of a classroom.
And creativity. I mean, some
Yeah.
people think scientists are not very creative, but I don't agree. And I think,
I think you have to be very creative in the sciences.
I think there's a big connection between fine arts and science on that very experimental level, because we're always pushing students to be creative and try new things. I mean, on one level, that's where science is at too.
Right.
It's that new thinking. It's that, well, what is the problem? How can we think about it in a different way? That's really crucial, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, being
Yeah.
creative is very important, I think, because you got to try and think outside the box, think of new solutions, something that hasn't been thought of before, in order to solve problems that nobody's solved before.
Yeah, somehow in science, when you solve one problem, 14 other ones come along with that solution.
That's right. Well, that's good because it makes gives us a job.
Gives you a job. As you're messing up the world, you can keep sweeping up after yourselves, right?
We're not messing up the world.
Yeah, no,
'cause
it
it's
doesn't sound
important.
like it.
No, it's important to try and understand all these other things, and it's a very complex universe we live in.
It is. It is. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's very fascinating, very interesting.
Now, this brings up something that we have not talked about, which is the huge project that's happening on campus, the Destination Project.
Yes.
What is your feeling about the Destination Project?
Well, I'll get a new office in 3 years. The lab spaces are going to look good. The offices look good.
You've been in very kind of antiquated lab spaces for a while now.
The University Hall is a wonderful building. It's wonderful for what it was designed for. Scientific research is not what it was designed for. You can see all the fume hood exhausts across the top of the building now.
All these pipes suddenly appeared on
so-
that beautiful building. It's like, what? Yeah.
Yeah, which is needed for the type of research that's going on. So there's a lot of very good world-class research being done, but we don't have the facilities for it here.
Right.
And so the building will bring in the facilities that we need for the experimentalist research in all the sciences. So that's awesome. The lab spaces for the theorists is going to be much better, so we can work better together.
What about its effect on teaching in your areas?
I haven't really seen much for the classroom designs. There was input from the teaching center about the classrooms that I liked, and so I pointed out some of the ones that I thought were very good classrooms here on campus, and I told them which ones I thought were the absolute worst.
Can you tell me what they look like, the ones that are the best and the ones that are the worst for you? What do you prefer?
Well, we can take C640. It's got triple projectors, so I can project different things on different screens. It's got the technology there, so that I can use some of the technology in the classroom. It's got lots of space up front for demonstrations, activities. There's also lots of space between the rows of seats, so the students can get up and do their activities as well.
Now, isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
That's so important.
Yes,
It's
it
got
is.
fixed seating, but if there's space between the rows, you can still do your
The
activities.
yeah. It's actually very nicely designed. The number of seats is not enough. Yes.
It's a smallish space.
It's got 74 seats, I think is what it's registered.
And your class of 80 is a little bit squashed in there.
Yeah. They don't like us putting 80 in the 74 seats.
Right. So, I mean, obviously, the really bad, the poor teaching spaces for what you like to do are the opposites.
Yeah, Turcotte Hall 177. Have you seen that one? It's basically a closet converted into
Closet, flat space, no grade.
Flat spaces are okay. If people can see and you want to move around.
Right.
Like the flipped classroom. That's nice design, a little too small, but it's got a nice design. And the flipped classrooms is a wonderful idea.
Okay, and what does the flipped classroom look like? And
The onus is actually on the students to do the teaching.
right.
And the instructor acts as a guide.
And they've done their preparation
They've done
before,
preps.
the students have done their preparation before coming to
Coming
class.
Right. And then they can break off into their small groups. And it works, and I can see it working really well for most classes, actually, except for unless you have 200 students and someone can seat 36, right?
Yeah, and we're working on that. You might be interested in some of the teaching center research on that. Jan Newbury and her teams, working with teams.
Okay.
I haven't read that, and I wasn't at her presentation.
Presentation.
So I think we're trying to
Trying to
bring
bring
the
that.
large classes.
I think the new
Into
destination
participation.
building has space for an 80-seat flip classroom.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Wow. So that could be very helpful and
Helpful.
forward-looking for students
Yes.
coming to the U of L.
Yeah, so I'm interested in seeing the size of the classrooms. They've got, I think, a 320 seat ones, and then the theater one, which will be better than the theater one that we currently have. Mind you, I don't mind PE 250. I haven't taught in it yet, but
It's very big and broad, yeah. Whereas there's another one that's like a
like
big
that.
hole, and
Yep.
people are way up there.
Yeah,
and
that
you
one
can hardly
is-
see them. And
Yeah, that one is too
very hard to
steep.
connect
Yeah,
with the
yeah.
people in the back
Yeah.
row.
Yeah, because I like the sort of wider one, like the C640, where it's only 3 or 4 rows deep, but around like that as an amphitheater, because then you're closer, you can get that interaction. Whereas, as you
Right.
said, the whole, yeah, you don't have any contact or interaction with them at all.
Right.
But,
Yeah, so it's a combination of the, you know, the space that you're working in, the kinds of students. It's a bit of a chemistry, a bit of a formula. No, you said it was all physics, so so it's a bit of your physical relationship with the
Relationships,
students
yes.
that makes the teaching work. Is there anything else you'd like to say before we close? Thanks for all that you've offered, but is there anything else that you'd like to say about the teaching of physics, or what have I missed?
more consideration in education about a liberal education type approach. I really believe in it. I think like drama could have helped me in my background. My trial by fire, I had no experience teaching or standing in front of a large class. And so that was all learning process. So first time in front of a class of 100, yeah, it was a little nerve-wracking. Yes, so, and you just sort of go, okay, I can
Right.
do this.
Right.
I remember at the beginning, how am I going to get through a 50-minute talk or a lecture? Do I have enough material? And then now it's like, 50 minutes, that's way too short. I need a couple of hours.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
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 That as you get that experience, you do see that teaching is not about the content.
No.
You have to constantly just check in with your learners, don't you?
Yeah. Content's an important part, but there's other aspects of it that are very important too.
Yeah.
Because, well, like I said, at the senior level, undergrad, they have to have the level. They're competitors from the other universities, right? And so they do need some content, but they also need to understand the connection, I think. And I think finding that connection with the other sciences and the other disciplines, social sciences, humanities, is important.
Well, thank you for that endorsement
Yeah,
of the
okay.
U of L philosophy.
Yes.
It's great to hear that from somebody that we often think of, in a field that is often so thought of as so specialized and needing such, focused and narrow education. It's interesting how it even enters a field like that.
Well, I still think physics is the one everybody should take.
Okay. We're not getting around that
No,
one.
I'm not going to back off on that.
Okay. Well, thanks so much, Ken.
Thank you, Lisa.
It will be a great pleasure seeing you in our meetings at the Teaching Center.
I look forward to it.
Great.